Welcome into the channel, everyone. Are you a welder or are you a grinder? They say that you shouldn't be grinding if you're a really good welder, but I say, when it comes to the right angle grinder, this thing is your absolute best friend. And today we're gonna go over a comprehensive training and safety video on right angle grinders. Let's do it. Now, of course, before we even get started with touching any of these tools and grinding on anything, we've got to talk first about housekeeping. It doesn't matter whether you're welding, you're grinding, you got to pick up the things around you, tripping hazards, cords, hoses, those sort of things got to get out of the way. You got to remember, we're going to be throwing some serious sparks in today's episode. We don't want to be throwing them across the room. You should have full control over the tool in your hands, so we want to make sure we keep our sparks down. Now, those sparks can be a hazard in causing any types of fires, so we need to see if there are any types of fire hazards around us, whether they be chemicals, just loose paper, or maybe some plans, worksheets, whatever they may be, and have a fire extinguisher really close nearby that is rated for what type of work you're doing. Because we have all different types of classes of fires, but when it comes to this one, we should be good with the fire extinguisher on hand, whether it be an A, B, or C. We're here at the 3M Cam Center, and I've got the applications engineer here, Miss Kaeliegh. Did I cover everything when it comes to doing, housekeeping?
I think something that I do see relatively common is mixing of metals. So any metal that ends with a UM, like aluminum or titanium, is more at risk for thermal events, aka fires. So you have to be really careful when you're mixing like stainless steel, carbon steel metal with aluminum or titanium metals. So like if you put them in the same time saver and you run like aluminum through a time saver and then you run steel through a time saver, that dust is prone to
If you don't know what a time saver is, it's what removes and puts a nice finish on something, if I'm not mistaken.
It is, yeah.
Cool, yeah, I've seen those, it's pretty sick. So keep everything nice and clean. Now, as far as everything we got across the table, Kaeliegh is gonna help me walk through each one of these different abrasives, the proper way to use them, the incorrect way to use them, as well as some of these other things when it comes to PPE and safety that we gotta start with first. Because again, we can't even grind yet until we're personally protectively safe. You gotta have pants, shirts, right? We want to keep everything covered. Preferably, if you can, maybe some FR material would even keep you from kind of getting burnt up a little bit extra. Some boots. That's the basics, including everything up here. We want to talk mostly, specifically, exclusively about the two peepers on your face. You only got two of these things, and I can give you from personal experience that I've gotten metal in my eye 3 separate occasions. It's not fun. You go to the doctor, they go in and pick it all out and drill it out. It's nasty. The only reason why I got metal in my eyes is because I wasn't wearing my PPE, my safety glasses. I would say most people will start to get complacent when it comes to this. When it comes to these types of grinding discs, what would you say you would require a face shield over something that might not?
From a anti-OSHA standpoint, the face shield is always required for portable bonded type products. So these harder discs, anything that when you hit it on a table makes that sound, that's called portable bond. You told me you bite on it and it goes you could just...
Don't bite, don't.
You could though. So cutoff wheel, cut and grind, and a grinding wheel, those are all going to require face shields.
A flip disc. I know that these things can still come apart and be dangerous, so I'd like to see them. But again, it comes down to the company's standards and their procedures. And when it comes to something like, say, one of these surface conditioning discs, that's not going to maybe necessarily require a face shield.
So the way that I always try to remember it too is if you need a guard on the tool, you probably should be wearing a face shield.
Guard on the tool, guard on the face.
Yeah, basically.
Easy peasy.
You always need a guard when you're running flap. You're always going to need a guard when you're running portable bonded. But it doesn't hurt, honestly, if you're going to be working on something for a long period of time. You never know what could happen or what somebody in another station close to you could be doing, so it's always best to protect yourself.
I like my face shield, and I don't always wear it, and I always call them warning shots. I'll get to grinding and something will hit me in the cheek, and that's my warning. I go get that face shield right away. But you mentioned something about prolonged periods of time and working and grinding, so that's what we talk more about next, is some other complacencies that a lot of people have when it comes to their lungs and their breathing, right? It's something that in my older years, I'll say, that I am trying to take a little bit more serious. And thanks to you all in the comment sections for always calling me out and making sure that I try to stay safe wearing PPE. Now, these things won't do me any good, will they?
Nope, not with that beard. It would work on me, because I just shaved my mustache, but it's not going to work on you. We have a reusable respirator as well, which is not going to work on you. Could work on me. For you, we would probably do something like a PAPR unit, so something like this.
What's that stand for?
Powered Air Purifying Respirator.
Basically just fresh air pushed right into your grill, right?
Yep.
You got fresh air in the face, you're completely sealed off. You can see that, it comes over the beard and everything. I know that these are a little bit pricier than, say, a dust mask or a respirator, but it's so worth it, so I can keep this beard on my face. Keeping those lungs safe is huge. And of course, when you're a welder, you're going to be doing some welding too, so you'll have other options that have grinding face shields on them. And you know, of course, they'll come down to your welding screens. It's a belt version, and then we got our backpack version, right?
Yeah, so any of these things can be used as face shields as well because your face is protected. So you could be wearing this papper grinding all day long.
Yeah, if I had to do nothing but grinding all day, I'd want something like that because it's probably the lighter weight of the options, not having all the ADF and all the extra functions for welding and whatnots. I used to wear them inside pressure vessels. Getting in those things, especially in the middle of summer in Texas, it was a no-brainer, put that thing on. Now, as far as safety glasses goes, there's a couple options you can have. Some of them aren't always the coolest, I'll have to say it. That doesn't make the suggestion that you can't wear them, right? But if they don't fit well, they're uncomfortable, you're not likely to wear them. So you need to find something that fits you, that you like to wear. You got your goggles, you got your glasses, you got your spoggles with a little bit of foam behind them. The other thing that I always get complacent about is my hearing protection. You're going to be losing some hearing if you're not using the right PPE. Now it could be some muffs, skull screws, or just some simple earplugs. Which abrasives do you think would pertain more to having to need earplugs than others?
I think it's about the duration of using them. First of all, I think if you're using an abrasive, you probably should be using some type of hearing protection just because tools are loud. Depressing or grinding wheel, cut-off wheels, the portable bonded type products, those are extremely loud. And another thing too that's really important is that you wear hearing protection that actually fits your ear. So everybody has a different shape of the inside of their ear. So maybe skull screws are great for you because your ears are huge. But maybe for me, I need something a little bit more petite, something small. So I would use something like maybe these little guys instead. Before
we get to throwing sparks, we still need to have better understanding of the right angle grinder. Now that comes in a bunch of different sizes, 4, 4.5, 5, 6, 7, 9, right? Those are all the different sizes that you can get, and you can also get them, of course, for maybe, say, your air right angle grinders. Now they're not necessarily right-handed angle grinders because all you simply got to do if you wanted to be a left-handy is just move that handle over. Now as far as the company's standards and their procedures, most of the time the safety requirements is that guard and handle should be on your grinder. Depending on the abrasives, you'll have a guard on there or not. For these two abrasives, the guard is recommended but not required. And then these types of portable bonded discs, the cut grind discs, gonna have to have that guard on there. So make sure you're familiar with your angle grinder, give it a turn over, look at all of it. There's different styles as far as how the triggers actually work.
That's a paddle style grinder as opposed to a side switch grinder. So the side switch will usually have some kind of locking mechanism so you can move your hand down the grinder while you're using it.
Right. Why on earth would you want to have something that locks compared to something like a paddle grinder, whereas it feels a little safer in my opinion?
I agree, but I think sometimes when you're doing prolonged work, sometimes that can fatigue the wrist a little bit to have to hold down the paddle, so some people will use this. Oftentimes the side switch will also be a variable speed grinder, which comes in handy when you have things that you want to run at different speeds.
Yeah, you'll see on the side here it has all that information, your max RPMs. This one having a variable speed on there. There are a lot of different abrasives that you could use for a lot of different applications with just one freaking tool, but they all kind of attach different, and there's a proper right way, wrong way to use them.
Yeah.
So you have your different types of styles and nuances, and I'm going to let Kaeliegh explain some of those nuances, starting with these flange nuts, right? That's what they're called. So what is the proper way to do a flange nut? Because you told me one way that I will never be able to get out of my head now.
You have two flange nuts, and they have these little lip type areas where they're just a little raised. And it's super silly, but the way that I like to remember it is that the lips go up, right? And when you have these two flange nuts together, you don't want the raised parts kissing. So the two lips kissing, you want them nestled in one another. So
she said spooning last
I did
time.
say spooning earlier, but
it makes sense, right? You're going to be able to, you can feel this first one lock into its little home, and then each one of these types of discs, like say this cutoff wheels are the perfect example for this type of stuff.
Actually,
we can't even use this one on this one because we have to have the right guard for it. What kind of disc is this?
Correct, that is a type 1 disc, so it's completely flat, versus a type 27, which has that concavity to it. It's type 1 cutoff wheel versus a type 27, which has that concavity to it. So type 27 you can use on this half face guard, which is what's on the tool currently. You can put a type 27 disc on here. The label is always going to go down.
And you want them spooning. If we're kissing, then that disc will spin in the grinder and it's going to only cause damage to this, where it's not going to do anything you wanted it to do. There are some times where these flange nuts, you won't need them at all. That's going to come into when you use some kind of backing like this. Now there's a few different types that you guys offer.
The extra hard is going to be the most stiff, so like you said, it's going to be the best for material removal, beveling, stock removal. Then we would go to the black, which is just our regular hard, a little bit more give, and then you have the gray one, which is medium. So
okay,
they tend to have a direct relationship. So 36 grit would go with the extra hard, then we would go 60 or 80 on the black and then the gray. But sometimes depending on the flexibility you need for the job, so think like pipe fitting, ID, OD, anything that has a radius or something like that, you could always go with this more flexible pad with a 36 grit to remove material as well.
Yeah, and these, whenever you go to screw them on, you don't want that flange nut on the back, because if you do, it's not going to give you any of these threads showing, so that your Tenderman nut, when you go to actually put your abrasive on, if you have that back nut on there, this retainer nut won't be able to reach.
Yep.
Right? So you got to pay attention, and then you'll notice, depending on what grinder you have, there are different retention nuts too. So you want to make sure that your nut on there, and that's the information for that right there is on the grinder too. This one says 5/8-11, so that's what you know what'll fit your actual grinder itself. The one thing that gets me in trouble is when I go from switching from say a fiber disc to remove a lot of metal to maybe going to one of these like Scotch-Brite wheels where I'm trying to put a nicer finish on something, just smoothing stuff up. I forget to put that nut on there, and this disc has no problem threading on at all. What's the big problem with that?
It'll get stuck.
It'll get freaking stuck.
It'll get real stuck.
If you've ever got your grinder and you're sitting and you can't get that wheel off to save your life, I could probably put money on it that you lost one of those flange nuts or you forgot to put it on. So you got to make sure that you put that flange nut on the back side of your grinder so that you can run the proper abrasive properly.
So you've already talked about center hole, which is available for almost all of the abrasives that we offer, right? Ultimately what this means is that there's no threads and you're going to have to rely on that second flange to keep this safely on your tool. The other option, which is super convenient, is the quick change hub. So it's basically got the 5/8-11 thread that you need on the disc itself. Instead of having to use that second flange nut to hold it down, you can just screw it right on top.
But you still need this guy.
You still need that bottom flange.
Because it will lock.
So now we could just spin this right on and it's ready to rock. What's happened to all of us, Austin? You know, you get it on there, it gets stuck, you need to get it off. How are you going to get it off?
What I usually do, whether it's got the quick set on there or not, I give it the old karate chop. So you figure it right where it locks and then you karate chop it off. Works better with a better glove. Then you go in to put this one on. You could do the same thing, but if you don't want to hurt your hands, you can sit there and use the proper tool that comes with the grinder. Use the tool. Jason Becker, of course, in the last grinder safety video we did a while back, had the best tip. Just putting a little drill hole in there and just zip tying it to your cord so you never freaking lose it. And the other bit of advice that he always said is you should always unplug your grinder when you're going to change a disc. Having that right there, because you have to use this to change your disc, you're going to already be thinking, I need to unplug this. So it's always a good reminder to keep that zip tied to it so you unplug your grinder and safely remove your grinding abrasive.
All right, Austin, look, I want to break the news to you softly, okay? I've seen your videos, think they're great. But I think when it comes to properly running these abrasives, maybe I should talk about it instead of you.
It still feels like a shot.
That's your own issue.
Yeah, it is true though. I have literally used these 1/4-inch discs that are only meant to use at a certain angle, not on their edges. You're not going to get the best use out of them if you use them improperly. So let's go over each one of these, and starting off with, say, the cutoff wheel. That's what people are most afraid of, I would say. You got to respect all of them the same. For a cutoff wheel, what don't you do with it?
There's a lot of things you don't do with a cutoff wheel. First of all, cutoff wheel, don't run it without the proper guard. So remember that type 1 or type 27 conversation, use proper guarding at all times. And then cut with it. So no grinding, don't use it on edges or in funky angles or anything. This is an abrasive that's made to only cut. Additionally, on all of the cutoff wheels, it should tell you everything you need to don in terms of safety or things that you need
Oh, they got
to
little
do.
pictures for me.
And then there's also everything you're not supposed to do. So if it's chipped or cracked or has any nicks in it, obviously you're not supposed to be running it.
Don't get complacent. If you see damage on it, get you a new one. I can't tell you what you do in your home shop, but you're taking a lot of risk running an abrasive with a crack or a chip in it.
And if you're taking it back to your workstation, right, and you drop it on accident, every time you drop it or if you hit it on something, it could have gotten a microchip in it, and it's better to just throw it away and get a new disc out anyways.
Now, running in from a little thicker to the 1/8 inch cut and grind, you'll see that the picture changes here.
But with the cut and grind, it's all in the name, right? So you can both cut and grind. You can also back gouge with this abrasive, either in a cutting application or working back and forth in almost like a feathering type way.
Yeah, I use these a lot when it comes to inside of a groove weld or a bevel where I'm kind of prepping my root pass, whereas if I try to put something heavy in there like a 1/4 inch, I'm going to be taking away a lot more material and bevel. They'll start to kind of cut on their edge and then they start to gnaw, and then they start to cut as you just kind of wear and tear on that edge. Don't run it on its side, and don't run it if it's chipped.
Up next, flap discs.
Yeah, flap discs, I think a lot of the rules are pretty similar. They work the best at a certain angle, and if you start to get them too far on their tips, they do work really well for a little bit, but you're only using just the tip of it.
Right. We've already talked about safety and all the different things that this specific product needs, but again, it's going to really work properly at a little bit of a lower angle. I like to say that flap discs are kind of like the Goldilocks of the abrasives world because a lot more forgiving.
When I first grabbed one of those, like in welding school, we used all these guys, and I grabbed the flap disc, I'm like, these things are awesome.
Yeah, right, exactly.
It's so smooth. The fiber disc is one of my favorite products by far because it just removes so much material, especially this 36 plus right here. I use it for beveling, mill scale. I use it for, I don't know, just hogging away some material.
The fiber discs like to be on a very relatively flat angle, so 5 to 7 degrees. We want this trying to make the most contact with this area of the disc.
You don't want to know too flat though.
No, you don't want to
know
too
too flat. Because then it gets squirrely on you.
You'll hit the Tinnerman nut or the center nut here, so that's how you know that you've gone too flat, and just pop the butt of the tool up a little bit, but it does like to run at a 5 to 7 degree angle, and that's where we can optimize the performance of the disc, because to your point, you don't want to dump the edge, which is really common if somebody is putting too much pressure.
Now moving on to the Scotch-Brite disc, we got 2 different colors here. I have used it on its side a little bit. What's the rule on that? Because for me in a wire wheel and grooves and bevels, I'm 90 degrees into that sucker.
Honestly, with these specific products, it's totally fine. I would recommend getting a 5-inch disc instead of a 4.5-inch disc because it gives you just a 1/2 inch of a little bit more lip to play with. Yeah, that's not a problem with this specific product.
Sick. Now when it comes to the surface conditioning, we got kind of the similar vibes and rules when it comes to the fiber disc.
Yes.
It's just basically taking it down in grit size to something a little bit different. Now I did remove weld with this disc here. It can still do it.
This product to me is really, really good for heavier material removal, really, really good on high pressure applications like edges, welds, corners, sharp sides.
It could put a nice sharp point to it.
Correct.
Just like the fiber disc, right? They still attach the same way. You can either have the retaining nut to go in there and fasten it. You might need a longer one because it is a thicker abrasive, or you got your Tinnerman nut on the back.
So I always recommend just going with the Tinnerman nut. I think it's just nice and easy, but
that won't get in your way.
Yeah.
Because that'll get things squirrely if you're not in the right spot. But you can hold that one pretty flat and really just put a nice smooth finish on something.
Yeah.
The way I like to do it is use one of these old dogs to hog off some metal and put some silky smooth on it with anything behind it.
Yep.
All right, guys, I think we understand the nuances of our angle grinder, the bits and pieces, and the walk around on how this puppy works. Not only that, but we know how to attach our abrasives and the proper way to use them. So I'm gonna demo them up real quick. We've got our grinder unplugged. I'm gonna start off by throwing on the Cubitron 3 cutoff wheel, putting it on the proper way, right? So we don't have that cutoff wheel spinning inside our grinder. It's locked in, I know it is, so I'm gonna go ahead and take that grinder and plug it in. Now even before I start cutting, I'm gonna test this real quick on the ground, just above the ground, to see if that disc truly is locked in. I know you've seen it because I have, where this disc will occasionally spin off. So it's a nice practice to keep it low before you get going, and now we can get to cutting. When it comes to a cutoff wheel, I like to place my guard in a specific direction so that I block the sparks that are coming towards me. I always say keep your sparks going towards your body and not your buddy. And if I lose control over this, I want it to go that way. So I want to make sure I have my hands in the right spots, and then we could just start letting a little bit of pressure in, apply a score mark on this thicker material, and we're going to work back and forth. We're not going to push this thing too hard as we get into it. I'll start by working it back and forth on that material. I'm not but halfway through it so far. I'm still not going to push through it with this cutoff wheel. I want this thing to do all the work itself. I'm just going to apply just a light bit of pressure and let the wheel work. Now I know I'm getting to the end of this where I can start to feel the ends of my cuts falling through. Now I can just take my time and let that cutoff wheel finish the rest of the cut. And that's it when it comes to cutting thick material. Now again, we're going to be cutting a lot of different things with the cutoff wheel. So when it comes to, say, a thinner piece of metal like this, I don't know, what is that? Maybe some 11 gauge material. Those nuances still stay in play. I'm not going to force this wheel through here. I'm going to let it score it a bit. That's going to give me a nice guideline so that that grinding wheel doesn't want to walk out of the way, and we'll just keep on that line right all the way across. See all that bouncing is because I've got this sheet metal too far up. That's a good thing when it comes to sheet metal to know about. We want to get it as locked down close to our fixture point as possible. Otherwise, you're going to see this wheel bouncing, and we don't want that whatsoever. That score mark is super important so that we keep our blade nice and straight and nice and square. When we're ready to swap discs, we don't just go and grab the blade. We should make it a good practice to come down here and unplug the grinder first. Now that we got our 1/8 inch cut and grind on there, we're going to again do a good habit of keeping it low, making sure that it's not going to come off. And now we're ready to rock and roll. We'll start with the cut and grind, operating it properly with the right angles. What I want you to notice is when I push into it, it gouges. This thing is a cut and grind. It will most definitely cut into some material. It may not be the option that you want for a weld removal, but it will still do it. You have to be careful. I recommend more of a pull motion when using this disc. We want to make sure that our grinding disc always stops off the material. And if you were watching, I did start working that grinder back and forth. Where I said we wanted to pull it, I was pulling it until that little bit of a corner started breaking away. And as long as I didn't push too hard, I could still push it and remove metal. Now I can easily go from taking off a weld to cutting some material with the cut and grind and using it on its edge. Same nuance with the cutoff wheel. We want less fixturing for vibration. That is a much wider cut. I would always go with a cutoff wheel in my preference, but you can still get through some material with a cut and grind. It's just going to have a much wider kerf. The grinding disc is better for weld removal. Plug it back in, do our safety check. Some of the rules apply when it comes to grinding with a 1/4 inch disc to the cut and grind. I don't want to put it on its edge. Obviously, that's not what it's made for. We talked about that enough. But a new disc, you'll notice it'll gouge into the material pretty easily if you're not careful. So always start by breaking that first corner on a new grinding disc by dragging it. Not only do we not want to stop the disc on the actual material itself, we don't want to just willy-nilly toss it aside as it's still rotating. Of course, weld removal, it hogs it, but the beveling is where I see it shine most of the time, and mill scale removal. So again, keeping it at the proper angle. I don't like to push into it because that's going to give you a gouge. It's okay to get it started maybe that way, but when you really start wanting to put the nice bevel on it, we're going to go to that drag angle. Maybe a little in. You have to be conscious about how you're using it and the angle you're operating at it so that you can get the right material removal without gouging the part and you get yourself a nice bevel to weld on. So Kaeliegh, what do you think? How'd I do?
I think it looks like you actually listened to me.
Safety is written in blood. This stuff is nothing to play around with. You can really injure yourself with an angle grinder. You want to always be safe. Proper PPE is where it starts.
Choosing the right abrasive for the job, choosing the right PPE for that abrasive, and just making sure that you're respecting the abrasive like you've said, and running it properly so that you can get not only the job done, but the job done efficiently and safely.
And get the most life out of the stinking wheel, right?
Yeah.
Later on this year, we got Clash of the Grinders. We did it last year. We were super involved. This year, we're getting more involved. We're super pumped with what we've got cooking up. Not only that, but everything that you've seen in this video, we've got the links down below for you. So if you have any questions, go check out those links. See you guys on the next weld.
Is the wave good? Do we wave at the end? You didn't.
You can. I was just kind of. Just wave.